Okay, so I've cut my studs, and the way I figured out how long my studs need to be is this. I know that my wall is 2.1 high, and the top and the bottom plate are 45 millimeters thick. And what I mean by that is this. The thickness of the timber is 45 millimeters from that point to that point. Right across that width is 45 millimeters. I have a top and I have a bottom plate. They're both 45 millimeters. Together they're 90 millimeters. And I actually physically measured this before. So I take the 90 millimeters off the 2.1, which is the height of the wall. That came out to 2 meters and 10 millimeters. All right. So the length of my studs are 2 meters, 10 millimeters. Now what I did is I set up a stop on the bench saw. And the reason I set up a stop is that I know that every single stud I cut is going to be the same length. What I also did was, as you can see, that's got a rough edge on it. The habit you need to get into is that when you cut a stud, is you cut that off, that rough part off, and it ends up looking like this. The reason being, there's two reasons. First of all, you know, by cutting that and forming a smooth surface, it's going to sit against the top and the bottom plate quite nicely. And you know that that is a 90-degree cut, so that's a square cut. Also, you're taking the roughness off there because it's not a 90-degree cut. Now, what I did was I made that cut, took that roughness out. I know it's 90 degrees. So what I do now is I slide it into my stop. I don't ram it into my stop. I just slide it into my stop nicely. You don't want to ram it in because every time you whack it, it moves the stop backwards, which increases the length of your stud. Then all I did was fire this puppy up and I cut it to length. All right. Now I know that this stud is exactly the length that I want it by setting up a stop. It's a good habit to get into when you're cutting especially when you're cutting 10 or 20 studs and you don't want them all the same length. Set up a stop so you know that every single stud is accurate. The other habit you need to get into is, if you have a look here, I've got a mark, an arrow on this on the stud, this piece of timber. What that represents is the bow, okay? So that mark is representing the bow up on that piece of timber. So what you need to do is when you cut your stud, you sit it on its edge, you bring it up to your eye height, and you sight down that top edge. And by doing that, that'll show you whether there's a bow in that piece of timber or not. So if there's a bow, you mark it with that mark, okay? And what I do with my bows, and I know a lot of guys do the same thing, is I set my stud up in my frame, and that mark is pointing upwards. And if you can see, there's a mark on that one, there's a mark on that one, there's a mark on the very first one. So what I'm doing is I'm actually putting the bows on the studs all the same way. So they're all facing up, all right? So always set a stop up so that you know your cuts are accurate. Always sight your studs for bows, mark your bow, and put all the bows up. Right, the next thing we're going to do with this is nail it together.